Hi everyone, my name's John. I'm one of the senior sales engineers at Sophos, and this video is intended for users of the Yorkshire and Humber Grid for Learning, or ICT4 as you might know it as. I'm joined today by Chris Major. Chris, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Major. I manage the education team here at Sophos. So we are responsible for looking after our education customers. Um, I guess the key thing we want to try and get across from an education team perspective is that, unfortunately, Yorkshire Humber Grid is no more. When that organisation broke up, we issued licensing out to schools on an individual basis. A large number of schools took us up on that. Hopefully, those are the guys that are attending this call. The licensing all expires at the end of March this year. We're very keen to try and get customers to renew those licenses. Primarily, there's a couple of different options around that, and John's going to talk a little bit more around the technology involved there. But I guess, schools initially had an on-premise license from us through Yorkshire Humber Grid. When Yorkshire Humber Grid dissolved, we issued out either an extension of that on-premise license until March, or a cloud version of the same product. We have since released various products, but primarily there's an upgrade path available to our Intercept X feature set, which is something, as I say, John will cover. What we have done is we have put some special pricing together for customers who are, I guess, moving away from what was an ICT4 provided license to an individually provided license. Obviously, there were large cost benefits with Yorkshire Humber buying a lot of licenses in one go and aggregating the cost across a very large license. We're looking to try and replicate that to some degree to allow schools a cost-effective way to migrate onto our central cloud platform if they haven't done that already, and potentially upgrade to Intercept X. Like I said, that's all I will add. I'll pass back over to John now so he can talk around the different technologies available.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Okay, so what we're going to do is, first of all, look at the changing threat landscape, and then we'll move on to look at some of the changes that have happened with Sophos technology since you possibly heard from us last. So let's begin with looking at how the cyber criminals have evolved. Obviously, we all know that the world is a scary place and that there's an enormous quantity of malware out there. But not only are we seeing an increase in the amount of malware and also an increase in acceleration in the quantities of malware, but also we're seeing a shift in the approach and sophistication of malware. If I think back to my IT career and when it started, then the world in the early 2000s was full of misleading applications. So this was the cyber criminals' first attempt at getting money out of victims. What they did is create applications like this that appeared uninvited on endpoints and would basically look to run a scan and claim to find lots of issues with that device that may be impacting on its performance, with the hope that the user would then choose to unlock the licensed version of this product and solve all of those issues. But of course, nothing's really going on here except the unfortunate victim is being scammed out of some money. And people cottoned onto this pretty quickly. And that led the cyber criminals to really change tactics and instead start to leverage the increasing awareness of cybersecurity. So people started to realize they needed stuff like antivirus, and the cyber criminals took advantage of that by creating fake AV and again running scans on a device, claiming to find lots of issues, and then offering an unlocked version of the product, which is chargeable and would solve all of these issues. But of course, the only virus that the user actually was experiencing is the one that was front and center, and again, it was social engineering. So the cybersecurity industry went to great lengths to highlight this problem and make people aware that they should be using sort of legitimate mainstream antivirus products. So the cyber criminals had to shift tactics, and we saw the first iterations of locker ransomware. These would lock either your web browser or your computer wholesale and basically use social engineering and pressure to get the users to pay what was badged as a fine. So you would see geographically relevant images like the ones that you see on the screen here, basically saying you're doing the internet wrong, you've downloaded illegal material, you've downloaded copyright material, for example, and even leveraging things like child pornography to try and make people panic and then part with their cash and pay the cyber criminals off. But these were relatively easy to get around. using things like SafeBoot, you could remove these pretty easily. So the cyber criminals had to evolve yet again. And in 2013, we saw the first iterations of true ransomware, actually recycling some stuff that was going on in the late 90s with regards to encryption, but for the first time hitting out the masses. And what would happen if you got hit by things like CryptoLocker is your data would be encrypted, so scrambled up with a private key that only the cyber criminals had access to. And then our unfortunate victim has a choice to either accept that data is lost or pay the cyber criminals off and hope that they get their data back. And we saw this start to spread in prevalence, really kind of hitting the headlines again very, very heavily in 2017. So if you don't recognize these two by sight, you will certainly recognize them by name. On the left-hand side, we have WannaCry, and on the right-hand side, we have NotPetya. Both hit the headlines because not only were they very devastating to the organizations they attacked, but they also spread very, very quickly to organizations. So we saw instances where one device would be compromised and then very quickly the rest of the network would go down as well. And that's because cyber criminals were blending this technique of ransomware with an older approach of a network worm. So basically looking for other victim machines and spreading very quickly. And then more recently, we've seen ransomware iterations like Emotet and Ryuk, which are advanced persistent ransomware. So they do the same thing. They spread around the network really quickly, but they also hide out somewhere as well. And once our unfortunate admin has gone around and fought all the fires and cleaned up, then they spring back again and the whole process starts all over again. And it can be extremely painful. And those are just really the tips of the iceberg. There are now in excess of 200 different crypto ransomware families. And at Sophos, unfortunately, we fully expect to see a similar blended attack coming down the line in the future at some point that will hit the headlines again, because again, they will spread very, very quickly and bring organizations down. So with that in mind, what have we done? What have the good guys done to evolve to deal with these issues? Well, first of all, something that might be new to you is Sophos Central. As Chris mentioned at the start of the call, some of you may already be on Sophos Central. Many of you may not have heard of Sophos Central. It is a web-based management portal that allows you to access your devices from wherever they happen to be. So no longer are you expected to have all your devices in the same building in order to manage them. This copes with the fact that devices may go home, teachers, students may take them home, you may have remote locations. Sophos Central doesn't care because it's web-based. It can see those devices wherever they happen to be, and you can manage them, you can get reports off them, and you can change policy on those devices wherever they happen to be. We also allow you to manage that console from anywhere as well. So you can, as long as you've got web access, you can use that on your laptop, your tablet, your mobile device. So you can manage your estate from wherever is most convenient. And users can even do some management themselves. So you can, for example, allow them to do things like release their spam quarantine, reset their passwords, kind of clever little things like that, just to take some of the IT administration burden away from yourselves. But we've done more in terms of evolution than just change the management console. We have also introduced a new product line, which is called Sophos Intercept X. This is our next generation defense against the issues of malware and ransomware. And first of all, you might be wondering, if you heard the term next gen, well, what is it and why do I need it? Well, basically, this is the reason. We see 450,000 new malware samples every single day. And old security technologies like Sophos Enterprise Console rely very heavily on signatures to classify and capture these particular types of malware. And those signatures are generated by our labs. And what that means ultimately is if you are unfortunate enough to come across a piece of malware before we do, then there is precious little that we offer in terms of protection using the basic signature approach. And that's obviously not sustainable in a world where we see nearly 500,000 new malware signatures every single day. So we need next generation technologies in order for the endpoint to be able to work for itself and work out for itself what is likely to be malicious. Now, I won't go through all of the technology in this session, but to give you a bit of a highlights reel, then the first thing that we do is we employ on Intercept X our machine learning engine. So the artificial intelligence in our machine learning engine has been trained on the likes and characteristics of malware, and then it applies that knowledge and that understanding to other samples that it sees. So if it behaves in the same way, if it has the same characteristics, then the engine is there to classify malware, even if we've never necessarily seen that version before. Now, we've also got the anti-exploit technology as well. And believe it or not, even though we see such an enormous number of malware types and signatures out there, there are actually only 28 underlying methods that a cyber criminal can use to what's technically called execute arbitrary code on a target device. In other words, if I want to own a target device, then there are only 28 underlying methods I can use to push my code to that device. And InterceptX has your back. It's programmed to recognize those underlying techniques. And even if the cyber criminals package up an attack in a slightly different way, assuming they're using one of those underlying methods, then we'll still detect it and we'll still block it. And then finally, at the 3 o'clock position there, we've got our anti-ransomware protection as well. So the anti-ransomware protection is there as a last line of defense. Basically, we've talked about ransomware, we've talked about the encryption of files. The InterceptX element that comes into play here is our crypto guard. And what this is doing is looking for those telltale signs of encryption and then stopping that malware from encrypting those files and putting any damaged files back into the original state. So it doesn't care how the malware got there. It doesn't care what flavor of ransomware it is. All it cares about is files are being encrypted, and that's clearly a bad thing. So those are some of the highlights of InterceptX and how that can help protect you. But there is a tier above that as well. So we've also added in what's called EDR, endpoint detection and response capabilities into InterceptX as well. So this is a next tier of products up. And what EDR does, and first and foremost, of course, is give you all the protection that we've just talked about. But then in addition, it allows you to then start looking across the rest of your estate and actually looking for the telltale signatures of malware that maybe hasn't detonated yet, or fragments that have been left behind. And you can do a statewide hunting as well. So for example, if one of your users gets malware because they went to a particular website, this will allow you to say, well, who else went to that website? Who else got an email with an attachment on there that's like this? Who else has seen this particular file? So it helps you to manage the whole estate as one entity and be much more efficient in what you do. It will also give you threat intelligence as well. So it will show you where stuff came from, what it's interacted with, what it's left behind, and then also give you suggested next steps as well. So it will give you prescriptive guidance on how to clean up anything that it finds. And it will also expose as well the underlying technology of our machine learning capabilities. So telling you in real terms and in real time what we've seen, why we think something is malicious in nature, what characteristics it exploits, and also, exhibits, and also show you things like how similar is it to other types of malware that we've seen before. You know, what code does it look like? How are the attributes similar to other things that we've seen? So all of these technologies allow you to make your own decisions on stuff that it might be malware, but we're not certain. You can use your human logic to convict something, and then use the tools to clean up and remove those malware samples, and then use the prescriptive guidance, the guided incident investigation to look to see what else it is that you need to clean up and what actions you can take to help protect yourself better in the future. You can also choose to respond with a simple click as well. So remember, this is what I was talking about with the ability to block files that you've seen. So if you see an incident that's been created as a result of a malware detonation, then you can say, if that file ever crops up again, I just don't want to see it, just block it immediately. So it's a very, very powerful way of changing your security stance. And it also has powerful management capabilities as well that extend beyond the realms of traditional IT security. So there's two things I want to talk about here. There's the live discovery capability. So you can use this EDR tool to search across your endpoint estate and carry out lots of really, really sophisticated searches. Things like, who else is running this type of software? What operating systems do I have? Who's vulnerable to this particular patch? Where will I find this particular file? All of those are kind of really, really clever searches that allow you to manage your estate much more effectively and also respond as well. So the live response allows you to remotely remediate devices by launching a command line interface on that device, wherever it happens to be, you know, just using the power of Sophos Central to be able to respond to incidents when they occur and carry out actions on that device. Now, all of that stuff sounds great, but there is an element of work involved in it, and that may not necessarily be for everybody. So if you don't feel that you can bring the expertise and the time required to do all of those things, then maybe our managed threat response services for you instead. And managed threat response capabilities include the blending of both artificial intelligence and actual human beings in a security operations center, looking at your network 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, detecting where things are going wrong, and highlighting that using that combination of machine and human intelligence, and also with your consent responding to those incidents. So you can actually allow us and authorize us to carry out remedial action on your behalf, or we can tell you how to fix the problems depending on your level of expertise and your level of preference as well. And what this ultimately does is solve a lot of key security challenges. Things like I can't find the staff, I can't find the expertise that I need to run these kind of EDR solutions. Or maybe you've bought some stuff already and you don't really know how to use it, and you're not getting the most out of it. Or you just want to start this process of looking for threats, but you don't really know where to start. Or a common thing which I frequently hear is we're expanding so rapidly, we're absorbing other schools, we're becoming a multi-academy trust, and we just don't have the resources that we need to manage this whole IT security state. Well, the Managed Threat Response Service basically takes all of that risk and outsources that responsibility in no small part to Sophos. So that really can help you manage the rest of your IT estate by taking the security burden away from you. So essentially, you've got a sort of sliding set of controls here, and you can choose, how much you want to spend and what your appetite for risk actually looks like. But fundamentally, there are 4 tiers of protection. Just to summarize, there's the most basic signature level of defense. There's Intercept X, which includes all of that next generation protection, and then you've also got our EDR product, which allows you to embark on threat hunting and manage your estate as a single entity. Or alternatively, you can choose to go down the route of managed threat response and outsource that protection to Sophos. So that's a very quick overview of the options that you've got for renewal on your endpoint. But I did also want to highlight something else to you as well, which is something we've been working at really hard at Sophos, which is this concept of synchronized security. So what synchronized security does is allow multiple different Sophos security technologies to actually start to work together as a system, share threat intelligence, and collaborate when incidents occur. So I'll give you just a couple of examples of how that looks in a second, but I wanted to introduce the XG firewall to you first of all, because that's the key component of synchronized security. So the XG firewall sits at the edge of the network, and it can carry out a bunch of sophisticated scans in its own right. Things like multiple AV checks, an intrusion prevention engine, and then also lots of technology in there like sandboxing and threat intelligence that we just looked at for Intercept X is also present on the firewall as well. So you can really gear yourself up to protect yourself against the latest generation of threats. And then it will also do things like web content filtering and reporting on activity as well. So it has a lot that it can offer an educational establishment. In particular, web filtering, so things like enforcing of safe search and YouTube restrictions, giving you the ability to really tailor your web browsing policies to year groups, staff, students, all that kind of stuff, and allowing override codes as well. So if you're embarking on lessons that might be on the peripheries of things that are deemed acceptable, then the teachers might have a code to override web content filtering in an appropriate set of circumstances with a complete audit trail. So not getting in the way of delivery of education, but also maintaining those safeguards and those controls. Synchronized security, in particular, when used with the XG firewall, can also help solve a very common problem for education, which is the application control problem. On average, we find that 45% of network traffic is simply not classified, and is very difficult to decipher on reports what that application traffic actually is. And buried inside there, you might have things like students using VPN technologies to bypass web content filtering and access material that they otherwise probably shouldn't. And how we solve that problem is using a collaboration between the endpoint and the firewall. So every time an endpoint launches an application the XG firewall doesn't know about, then the XG will ask the endpoint for more information. So it will ask it for things like the path, the application name, and often the category itself is information the endpoint has and can pass back to the firewall so that the firewall can learn the application, classify it, and then obviously subsequently we can report on application usage and also build some blocks in place if these are applications that we don't want to see in our organization. So that helps you keep on top of the application control problem. What we can also do is respond to an incident as well. So all of our devices generate what's called a security heartbeat, and that's normally green, indicating health. However, if one of our devices does become compromised in some way, then that can be detected by the red heartbeat status, and our firewall can respond to that automatically by doing things like blocking access to the internet, blocking access to other network segments. And simultaneously, the other devices on our network will also be told not to communicate with our infected machine, because what we don't want to do is have that malware spread laterally across the rest of the estate. And some of that traffic, that east-west traffic, may not be going anywhere near the firewall. So using the power of Sophos Central, we can isolate that. We can make sure that infection doesn't spread. So what I will do is finish up this session by actually showing you how that looks in reality. So what we've got here is a Sophos protected endpoint, which is at the moment healthy. It's running a green heartbeat. And normal workflow for a lot of users, particularly staff members, probably is to check their emails first thing in the morning. And what we're going to do here is, first of all, we've got a newsletter here from a popular theme park. I can click through there. And what I'm doing really here is just illustrating that we have internet access available to this user. So we can get online. We also have an invitation here to open a file share. Now, that could be a server somewhere else in the same network segment, or it could be on the side of the firewall. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this demo. And here you can see we have access to that resource as well. And then finally, there's also an invitation to an RDP connection. Now, that might be something as simple and mundane as a digital display screen in reception, for example. So we're going to open up that RDP connection, and we're going to have a look at that resource and just verify that we've got access. And as you would expect, we can open that up because, again, the device is healthy. We know that everything is fine, so we can access that resource. However, the last email in our inbox might just change things. If you have a little look at that, then it claims to be a message from the HMRC offering a tax refund. Now, some of you may be smiling wryly at this point because you probably recognize that this is actually a phishing attack. However, for the purposes of this demo, our user is going to fall for it, and they're going to open up that attachment, and they're going to activate all the content inside there. And what you see here is InterceptX very rapidly detecting the ransomware inside the payload, isolating it and shutting it down. What it's also done is change the security heartbeat status to red, indicating the device has a threat. Practically, that is now being used by the firewall, which is blocking internet access because we know that this device is potentially compromised. What's also happening is other devices on the network are now being told that this machine in particular has a problem. So that file server is now being told not to accept communications from this device because, again, we know it might be compromised. The same is also true of our RDP connection as well. So this device is now being completely locked down, and it's unable to reach out to any other command and control systems on the internet or devices inside the network to spread itself around. What's happening in the background is Sophos Central is now busy cleaning up that infection. If we wait long enough, there we go, right on cue. The heartbeat has now gone back to green, indicating this device is now clean again. So obviously, we don't want to get in the way of workflows. So if this device is clean, then we'll allow it to go back on the internet, no problem at all. We can also restore access to those internal servers and internal resources as well, because we don't want to get in the way of productivity. We don't want to get in the way of education delivery. So as soon as we know the device is healthy, we will allow that access back again. But do bear in mind, all the time where it was potentially compromised, this device in particular was being pinned down. So I hope that's a good illustration of how synchronized security can work in an education establishment. In summary, first of all, on the endpoint itself, you've got multiple different choices. You can choose between the most basic levels of protection all the way through to outsourcing your endpoint estate protection to Sophos. And then while you're looking at your security estate in general, do bear in mind the capabilities of synchronized security. Bear in mind the automation that it offers and the ability to uncover new and unknown applications in your network, as well as respond to incidents when they occur. So if you've got any questions, you're welcome to reach out to myself or Chris at Sophos, or you can speak to your account manager at Virtue, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to take you through what you've seen in a bit more detail and discuss your requirements in more detail. So that's all from me for now. Thank you very much indeed for watching, and I hope to see you in person at an event very, very soon. Bye for now.